To us, magic sounds like this extraordinary thing, pulling a rabbit out of the hat, coming out of nowhere. But it's here, it's real, and the more that we are open to the unseen, to the energies of this world, to abundance and manifesting, to calling in and growing, the more we'll be able to call magic into our lives. Join me as I share stories, wisdom, and curiosity around connecting with your higher frequency, tapping into the synchronicities of the universe, and opening up to the unseen possibilities that this world has to offer. I am your host, Dayna Faye, and this is the Ordinary Magic Podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ordinary Magic. Today, I have a special guest on. Her name is Brienne Hennessy, and she is the founder of Your Vocal Vitality. She is a highly sought after vocal empowerment guide, keynote speaker, and author. For 17 years, she has specialized in voice and how it connects to our well-being and self-worth. She has expertly guided executives, entrepreneurs, and speakers to communicate with more assertiveness, speak without strain, and listen to their intuitive voice so that they show up as their true nature and aligned selves. Brienne is also a former speech and voice pathologist with 14 years of clinical experience and 55 plus public speaking appearances. Brienne's clients have succeeded in protecting the vital asset of their voice with increased stamina, ease, and improved communication and confidence, which has resulted in more presence and profit for their businesses. You'll often find Brienne incorporating water into her day, whether staying hydrated, lounging at the lake, or blowing bubbles to warm up her voice. Welcome, Brienne.
Thank you, Dayna. I so appreciate you taking this time and inviting me to speak with you today.
Thank you. And thanks for being here. In the little bit of preparation, I got up this morning and did my little humming to exercise my voice. I sang a lot when I was younger. And so I understand the importance of warming up your voice. And I also can tell that I've lost my range because I'm out of practice with singing as I've gotten older and have been singing less. And so this is super fascinating to me that you are helping people with their speaking voice.
Mm-hmm. It comes through often that people only assume singing because that's where we kind of put together those two components of training must mean only for singing. But when we look at even singers, we use our speaking voice 90% of the time still. You know, it's the core way that we as humans are communicating, and yet it still deserves as much care and training as we would give it for any other instrument.
Yeah, that is so true. I remember I played French horn when I was younger, and you have to grease up the whatever it's called and get the spit out of the machine. And
yeah.
So of course, even though we can't see all the parts of our voice, you're saying it is an instrument.
It is. And while indeed it lives in the dark all day, unlike any other instrument where you can take it apart, do whatever you want with it, learn all the inner and outer parts, this is something I think that a lot of people do take for granted. They don't mean to, but we're fortunate, right? The majority of us to be able to wake up and communicate through voice and speech. And so to me, it's one of those catch-22s. I loved working with singers. I had the fortune to work with all types of singers over the years in the clinic. And yet it still comes down to what is the speaking voice like in the midst of a day, a week, an activity? And does it get as much attention as the preparation for singing? People can always remember, I took singing lessons, or I was in choir, or whatever the thing was. But it's funny when I ask people, what do you do to warm up your speaking voice? No real sense for it. So I'm giving you a lot of kudos for warming up this morning with your hum.
Well, that was just because I didn't want you to judge me if my voice didn't sound good.
Oh, goodness. We leave judgment at the door. There is no space for judgment here. But I get that a lot. People are like, are you listening to my voice right now? So I can turn it off. But that speaks to a part of it too. What do we characterize our voices as? Do we worry that other people are judging us? Are there a lot of biases that abound with how our voices sound, both how we view them and how others view them? And yes, there are. And I think a lot of that ends up negatively impacting how we sound, how we think we should sound, how our voice maybe manifests physical symptoms because of it.
Yeah. And I imagine even the intonation of our voice, that must be something you work on with people, because a lot of people have issues around confrontation or being a people pleaser, things like that. And we manipulate our voice to make other people feel comfortable around us or to make ourselves smaller. Do you find that with your clients?
Definitely. And to some degree, can always be kind of two sides to it. On the one hand, in order to have that sense of communication and belonging, we're very good at, the human nature is to kind of mimic. And even in my background's in linguistics as well, there are these different ways between our dialect and our accents and our communication styles that we want to have that mimicry and be able to say, I'm with you, I see you, we belong here, etc. So then when it tips the scales into something that's detrimental, like you said, either repressing what we need to say, making ourselves smaller, feeling like our voice doesn't match. And a lot of times this happens more in the minority communities, especially for women of color. They have to code switch. And we're all very good at code switching. We just wouldn't necessarily call it that, depending on your level of presence in society or privilege. But code switching is sometimes very useful and sometimes purely, like you said, for safety reasons. And so I think we have to look at what point are we in our power choosing to do that and knowing in those moments? And then at what point are we doing it unconsciously and it's creating a disconnect or a dissonance for that interaction and for yourself? So a lot of the times when I would work with, again, particularly women, sometimes men as well, this would come through. It would be this idea, for example, that, well, I need to sound more authoritative, so I'm going to lower my voice. And if I do that, people will respect me and listen to me. Maybe that voice that I just did sounds a little more present or has more gravitas, whatever words we want to put to it. To me, it doesn't feel comfortable. It's too low in my range, for example. So while there are shifts we can make between intonation, our resonance, how we are phrasing, how we are pacing ourselves, lots of different unique things, I think it comes down to, are you willing to know and understand your voice as it is now and how you want it to be?
That's so fascinating. So take me back to your life prior to being a speech and voice pathologist. Were you aware of your voice? Did you have a personal experience, or was it just a field you ended up stepping into and then getting passionate about?
I wouldn't have been able to identify it at the time, but now and early in my 30s, I realized how much of a people pleaser I was. And that's still unlayering as things do. How much I desired to be heard, but didn't know how to respond appropriately when I wasn't heard and seen. How much I get often told I'm too touchy-feely or too much, whatever highly sensitive person descriptor that people want to put on. And really noticing, what will other people think if I do or say this? Those are definitely identities that I used to 100% embody. And I thought I was really good at being a chameleon. You get praised for such things, right? You're so good in this situation or this situation. Or as my 12-and-a-half-year-old said the other day, she's like, you could just talk to anybody. Like, she's not that way. She's much more of an introvert and very reserved in some ways. So she just kind of looks at me like, why are you talking to all these people like it's no big deal? And so, like we were speaking of, when it comes to code switching, even, there are strengths in those labels, I suppose. But it really wasn't until noticing situations both in my workplace that were not going well anymore. Usually I would be the one who was chastised for speaking up, or again, since I didn't really know my limits, I knew nothing about HD at that point, and that's a whole nother topic. No, didn't realize my limits or how it came across in that way. I would just push, because again, if I'm not being heard, well, maybe if I just say it again, or maybe if I just amp up the emotion to it, like that all came through a lot. And, to some degree, that can be looked at as passion. To other degrees, it can be looked at as getting called into the manager's office more often than other people. So in that respect, it was starting to be a little bit of a theme. And then for me personally, at this point, I was already into the voice world by middle of undergrad. So I would have been about 22 and knew I wanted to go on and do voice. but certainly didn't know myself at that time. I don't know many people who do. There are the few wise souls who are attuned to such things. But in that period from about 19 to my early 30s, I was with my daughter's father, and we were married for 10 years. And then in 2013, after we moved to Madison, where we live now, actually, we kind of abruptly separated and divorced. And that was a big turning point for me, because similar patterns that had been showing up at work were amplified at home. I had experienced anxiety, depression, what I know now to probably postpartum depression, but didn't know that that was a thing at that time. And it wasn't until this drastic shift in something I never saw coming or didn't even think was a possibility, something like divorce, that on the flip side, I actually was able to reconnect to my self-worth. And so to your question, those personal experiences, interestingly, while they launched my self-growth journey in a really powerful way, I also was able to then see those who would show up in the clinic over the next 8 years or so, how they showed up, and physically things were already changing, but internally I could see that they too were struggling with things like people pleasing and disconnection from their self-worth, and this level of stress and worry and frustration that for them just happened to manifest as a voice change. So it was one of those, can you find the silver lining in the difficult moments? And it took me a long time to be able to do that and say that now, that I am okay with everything. I mean, if you're not, you're kind of keeping yourself stuck. And at the same token, I think there's so much more potential for what we view as, oh, it's just a difficult work situation. Oh yeah, sorry you got divorced, but it happens to people. Like, we don't necessarily look at what it can mean for who we want to be. Are we showing up as our whole self? And everybody's self-growth journey gets, I think, activated by different things. Yeah. So for me, that's where the inner and outer voice piece came along, even though for, again, 10 years at that point, I'd been all about the physical voice, like all about the instrument itself and knowing and rehabilitating and speaking of that. So it's been really cool to see that evolve in a way where it's two sides of the coin.
Yes. You just added such another layer to the work that you do by having to go through that experience that was quite hard. But it sounds like you really took a magnifying glass to that experience. And unlike maybe trying to numb out with TV or food or not pay attention, it sounds like you allowed yourself to kind of feel into all the emotions, the grief, the changes in your life, and then say, okay, what is the lesson from this?
Yeah.
I'm going to get to know myself.
Yeah. And that is a huge, scary thing to do. And to be fair, it took me a good 5 years. Like, it was very slow in a way. Like, I was excited that now I had recognized, oh, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't have this sense of it's okay for me to speak up, but also it's okay if not everybody understands me. And yet it wasn't really until 2018, around that time, that I started working with one of my dear mentors on what does it mean to be embodied. I had done counselors and therapy, and I think that's really important for a lot of folks to give that a try and find a good fit. For me, it really then started to open up this idea of things are happening to me with a lesson, for me with a lesson, and now I believe through me from divine. So it's continuing to evolve, and I would say escalated in the best ways more in the past about 4 or 5 years.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Do you feel like that connection that you now feel to yourself and to your awareness and that essence from the divine that comes through you, was there a memory where you're like, it clicked, or was it a slow progression?
I'm getting a yes to a memory, even though it's not logically coming up to my brain. I would say, when I started allowing this idea of embodiment practices to come through. So yoga, for example, is something I've done kind of here and there throughout my life. And I loved it. I don't do it now as often, but I loved it and I could feel the differences in my body being connected in that way. But then having an understanding of what it meant to be with those feelings and allow them to push through. You'd mentioned TV and food. Funny you mentioned those. Those were my two definite numbing out and avoidance tactics for a long time, even in this process. And so I do remember it's kind of a mix of a few different times we met. But this friend and mentor of mine who had helped me kind of understand and start to practice embodiment. And by that, I mean being with the feelings, being in communion and connection with what is without spinning stories and trying to see and let it release as it needs to. I remember we did a couple practices and she held such compassionate space. I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel weird. I didn't feel awkward. I just felt like there was potential to show up and be me without justifying it. And not long after, as we would play with different ways to hone intuition, that moment of, oh, I really did feel that shift. I really did feel that yes and that no. And so it again falls in this period of about 2018 across these months that she and I worked together. I also was very, very much willing to be curious and be open about it, because you spend a lot of time thinking you're right. And in healthcare and academia world, there's a lot of conditioning that you need to have the answer, or you need to, if you all get together as this comprehensive team, you'll be able to figure it out. Sometimes not. But to be able to let go of that kind of certainty and rightness, that's what actually felt lighter and really, really relieving. So yeah, it's kind of an amalgamation of that. I thought, oh, that's what that feels like. And at the same season, around that same time, I had started rereading Joe Dispenza's How to Break the Habit of Being Yourself. And that shifted so many things for me as well.
That's really amazing. So, I mean, you are clearly now deeply connected to your intuition, even just how you answered that question before, hey, I'm feeling a yes, but logically that doesn't make sense. And that is such a great example as I've been developing my mediumship abilities this past year of having to let my mind really really not be in it. And it's quite the struggle. So I'm very impressed that you had that awareness right there of being like, oh, I got a yes, but your intuition can't always explain it. And then you went with it and you delivered the most beautiful story about how you've kind of worked through this phase of your life to connect to your intuition. I'm just super curious because we talked a little bit about human design. When did you find that system in your journey?
You know, it was funny in preparing for today, I was like, oh, maybe I should go through like stories in my journal, because they're all these dates of kind of different things. And I actually got a no to that. Again, thank you. Yes, like we'll just go with what comes through. So what comes is about 2021. Maybe even 2024? Wow. Yeah, 2021. This is where I get now in the last couple of years, like time is more meaningless to me in a way. So I was fortunate to be in a variety of different groups, networking groups as a business owner and fellow entrepreneur. You know, we grow our networks in different ways. And one of the women I came across is a projector in human design. She's also a coach for projectors in human design. And at that point, I had been starting seeing these little inklings. And I remember it was the summer, because it was kind of these like little smatterings of human design and what is it? And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And so finally I took the test, just the simple one on the Jovian archive site. And this was before she and I had like formally connected, but again, she'd kind of been in my world. And I started reading the interpretations, Dayna, and I felt so seen. Forget Myers-Briggs. I know y'all love Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and all the things. And yes, they all have their place. And I used to love taking those as well. But there get a point in the description where I'd be like, yes, maybe. Okay, but that's okay. Not everything's going to be a match, blah, blah, blah. Fine. Not so with human design. Like once I read even just the general description about being a 2/4 emotional projector, I was like, can I just go back and tell everybody from like the first 40 years of my life? Like, can I just say this would help you understand? So I just really started kind of following different folks. And I'm learning too, as with anything, you have to be discerning, right? Some of it's very,
Yes,
dare I say, even with human design, fluff, the way people present the interpretations of it, right? Versus the things that are more grounded. So when I came across the mentor that I ended up working with, Kendra Woods, she's amazing. I was like, wow. And then not only is someone a projector and like thriving in this and doing this, and all these different things. So that really helped kind of spur what it meant to use human design, and my approach to things really did shift. It's been interesting though. And that's why I felt the timing even of our meeting was so fascinating, because everything's cyclic. Yeah. So that year, 2021 into 2022, I was like, this is great. Like now I understand like how I work by, deconditioning from 50-hour work weeks for however many years, all of these different things, the deconditioning layers, but then really leaning into creating my own schedule and all of this. And then this last year, 2023, full burnout, which I didn't realize till about end of 2023. So, okay, reset 2024, feeling into that, and still kind of in this like, what is happening right now stage. So again, I just think it's fascinating, because clearly human design is meant to stay in my life, and I didn't ever think it would go away. But I love that there's these different moments of like different views and perspectives and experts, because I think I still feel like, but is there something I'm not seeing? It feels very much like me, but is there something I'm not seeing? So I love it. I don't know all the things, but I love the basics.
Well, and the founder of Human Design said you really actually only need to know your strategy and authority. If you actually just follow those two things, the rest of your chart should just fall in line. Now, all of us nerds out there are like, no, I need to know every dogmatic thing. But I will say that, I'm just so happy it landed for you like that, and that you found out you were a projector energy type, which is oftentimes the first layer that people learn before they learn anything more. Because your story in the beginning of our conversation where, I was telling everyone what they should be doing and maybe they didn't want to hear it, that is classic projector energy type. I mean, you have a gift. You have a gift, a way of seeing things more deeply. And in this case, in your lifetime, this has to do with your voice and your instrument and your intuition and embodiment, all those things. And as a projector, yes, your strategy is to wait for the invitation, because your aura can be quite penetrating. So for people who aren't ready to hear your wisdom, it frazzles them, right? So you have to either feel like somebody's recognizing you, you have to feel invited, or literally they're like, can you help me? That type of stuff. And all energy types can definitely feel burnout. Yeah. But the projector energy type is the most conditioned, because our society is set up for generators and maybe manifesting generators, and even a little bit manifestors with the whole initiating piece. Projectors are the newest energy type. They came to this planet, I believe it was 1781. They're the newest energy type. Our society is not set up for them, but your value is not in the work that you do, but how well you saw that day. And so I am so excited to have you on this podcast, because I have a lot of projectors in my life, but since I'm in the human design world, most of them are either life coaches or therapists or human design
of course.
And so the classic projector energy type, they say, you're supposed to be a guide, you're a teacher, you're a mentor. And you really are doing that in such a unique way. I mean, you really went from, working. Were you in a hospital?
Correct, yes. Different hospital clinics, voice clinics.
Yeah. So very structured, corporate, we don't care that you're a projector and you're only supposed to do your output for 3 hours a day.
That's
you're
right.
here for, yes, you are trading time for money, that type of thing. And now you're out on your own as an entrepreneur, and you get to really style your life as a projector. And to layer that on top of that, I mean, the 2 line, which is the hermit, you need time alone to be in your creative muse and feel through your authority, which is your emotional wave, to feel through the wave that your wave, because I got to see your chart.
Yes.
Thank you. Your wave kind of I don't know if you feel this way, but it kind of amps up. Like it gets like your wave more starts building, and then it kind of bursts like a volcano if you don't kind of like take your alone time and address that. Does that resonate?
That tracks. Absolutely.
Hey, magical beings, are you ready to connect deeply with your soul and uncover your true purpose and path? It's Dayna from Ordinary Magic, and I have 2 special offerings just for you. With my human design readings, you'll discover your unique blueprint and learn how to live in harmony with your true nature. And through my soul alignment sessions, we will connect to your higher self and your spirit team to gain profound clarity and deeper connection to your soul's essence. So whether you're facing life's challenges or simply need an energetic tune-up, book your session today and let's embark on this magical journey together. Visit my website at daynafaye.com, and now stay tuned for more soul nourishing content.
Because that's why I find it so funny and paradoxical with the 4 line too, like so 4 line as well, because, and I something about the 2 is the conscious and then the unconscious line. I'm not really sure if I'm using the right terms there. So I find that always fascinating because I do appreciate my alone time, and I do love cheerleading, supporting, being with the other, whoever and whatever that is. Yet this is where the transition this year has been so fascinating to understand and really be discerning of, even funny enough, what I said earlier, where, it's okay if not everybody understands me. It's okay if not every single person is in my network. It's okay if there's not every single type of thing. And that's been really interesting to trust and, yes, develop my day and my schedule, but trust that even those very recognizable people, and by recognizable, I mean they do recognize and see me and the work and want to hear more about it. And I don't even mean if they want to be clients. I just mean people who get it or excited about it, and trust that even if it's a smaller number is potent, and it's possible to continue and sustain what I'm doing without continuing to, I see it as things are going out in all directions and it's kind of thinning out, which feels very tiring. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for letting that come through. I appreciate how you hold space for when that's the thing about intuition, is sometimes the words are not always there, because I'm just honoring what's coming through.
It's really beautiful. I love that you're an example for that. And Ordinary Magic is all about showing that we are so much more connected to the unseen, to our intuition, our internal compass than we realize. And I mean, not only are you helping people care for the instrument of their voice, but you also help them find their intuitive voice so that they can express their true nature. I'd love to hear from you any examples of a client who maybe came to you just for their physical instrument and then were surprised to then maybe work through connecting to their intuitive voice.
So those are 2 of the kind of aha moments that you can't even predict, but when they happen, it's just so beautiful. So the first aha that people get in those moments of deepening and practicing and staying curious about their voice, and they go, oh, that sounded like me. And the sound matches them. And then the other aha moments, one of the folks I can think of is my client, Kathy. She had attended my Ignite Your Intuition workshop, actually. And then most recently was a VIP client. So we worked more deeply on both the physical, and she's a singer. And she came in saying, I know how to do warm-ups. I know how to do these things. But there was this disconnect with how she was feeling her relationships with her family were going, some difficulties with confrontational energy, anger energy. And that's what can happen. Your tone of voice, doesn't matter the words you say, can give it away. Even if you're not yet fully tuned in, we can perceive such things. So after the workshop, she and I had chatted a bit more, and I, at that time, was not necessarily thinking of it relative to her intuition, although I always kind of hold the intention and space for that. And so we were going through some breath practices and some vocalizing. And as I asked her to tune into where she felt different things in her body, she was able to, at that time, I remember, because she started talking about it in her low back. And I love that moment, Dayna. You must find this with your HD readings too. None of us are created the same. Yeah. So it's fascinating, even for intuition. For those of you who aren't yet sure about what your intuition feels like or the knowings, that is okay. A. And B, whatever anyone else says is how they feel it is probably them. It's not necessarily going to be you. So, point being, she was one of the first of the folks I've worked with who said she felt it in her lower back. And I thought, oh, that's cool. Mine, I describe my yes as kind of this flow openness of like an ether breath through the center of my body. More specifically, my no's are twofold. They can be, the first layer is usually tightness and constriction in my throat. The second is usually a tightness or constriction in my sacral, or both. And so I know the difference between like what each one means and when. But point being, for those of you listening, like, who knows how it'll show up for you, but that's the fun of it, right? And then you get to play with it and refine it. So she's going along and she feels this difference in her back and she's like, okay. And so afterwards, she's like, yeah, I'm so glad I felt something different. I thought, because a lot of thinking, right? I thought it was up here, already had these ideas. So then a few weeks later, she texted me and she's like, Brienne, I had this big decision to make and I was able to do the practice that we did and I got my yes and I could feel it. And I was like, oh, amazing, amazing. And so this is where you don't put pressure on yourself, your body's wisdom, nor the timing for that integration. Yeah. Like I think that's a piece that we don't often, and I'm just as guilty of consuming. And so A, as a projector, need to decondition the consuming, but also allowing that time to just integrate. So was she practicing that same practice every day? I don't know, but it changed enough for her that she knew and had that trust now in her body in a new way. So that by the time we met again this year we just wrapping up our sessions, she is, again, the back, she is much more now supported through that. Yes. And most recently, because she tends to have some conflict with her parents, her mom and her brothers, she felt the support come through her upper back now. So she has her yes through her lower back and this physical now sensation that she identified through some of our practices with this level of, oh, I'm like plugged in, she called it. Like I'm plugged back in. And I was like, it's just like I feel tingles through my whole body right now. Like it's so cool. And this is, again, unconventionally how I approach it. Between breath work, I believe the mind-body connection is imperative. And I believe the voice is a conduit to this well-being, to this inner source that's already within each and every one of us. So voice is just one modality that I just happen to know and love and be known for that can bring this forth. But there's lots of different ways. I just think it's important that we honor that we don't always have to logic and rationalize our way through it. But that's one example that it's really hard to put words to it. You can see and feel the lightness in her now, even through these very difficult, like family situations that she's going through. As she created the other day, one of her affirmations she created was, "My words matter." She believed it, Dayna. Like I can just hear and feel like she believed it as soon as she said it.
Full body chills. That's what a gift. To have that autonomy now and not look to outside sources, but to feel it from within. And you did such a great job explaining how she connected to her intuition and how it's different for everybody. It's really hard to explain intuition because it's words do not cover it. I mean, I too had to work one-on-one with someone and they had to tell me I wasn't going crazy over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I can only imagine now with mediumship's a whole nother level too of like, I would love to hear more about that, but yes, that kind of, we all have different like gifts in that way, but that, Dayna, I can imagine that's taking you to a whole nother level of both vocabulary, but also like the unknowing.
You are so right, actually, about the vocabulary. Like, I'm literally having to build a new dictionary of like, okay, when they show me this image, it means that. And when I feel this, it means that. And my yes is this and my no is that, just like how you were saying. And depending on the spirit I'm working with, it feels different every time. So there's no consistency. And yeah, so that's why definitely I had to work one-on-one with a medium teacher who, could responsibly get me there and certify that I'm not just making everything up that I was feeling and seeing and hearing. But a question that was coming up for you personally from myself, and hopefully some of the listeners feel this way too. You talked a little bit about the sacral chakra. let's bring it to the throat chakra now that represents the throat area. Yours is undefined in human design, which I find so magnificent, because when a center is white in your chart, that is an area where you're susceptible of picking up your not self themes when you're walking about the world.
Yes.
So like since yours is white, you are feeling other people's throat chakras. And you may in the past have felt a need to talk when somebody was silent or say what they were about to say. Oftentimes people with an undefined throat talk more than people with a defined throat. But I'm sure in your journey, like you've learned, that's where all your wisdom is too. You can be with a client and really feel into their throat chakra, which I think is so incredibly cool. But my question for you is, I've just realized this for myself in the past few months. It feels so good for me to talk and sing almost all the time. Like I can, like, especially because again, I'm an emotional in human design. So singing, especially, just a song that has emotions, and I'm literally feeling the vibration.
Yeah. Ooh.
And I just feel like I can feel it in my energy centers, and it feels so good. I downloaded your freebie from your website, and I was like, oh man, like I do know I'm straining my vocal cords. They do feel like they hurt a little bit at the end of almost every day. And I understand that's not healthy. And I was kind of giggling that this feels very similar to, like, I know I need to do my pelvic floor exercises, but I'm like scared to get started because you have to be dedicated, and same thing with your instrument here. Do you feel that way about how good it feels to talk?
It's a source of wellness, a source of replenishment. The voice is a source of rejuvenating, igniting, and activating. And so that what you're feeling is being in such alignment that it's not just you vocalizing, you are being voiced, being breathed. And that in turn is that deeper aligned soul self being activated. Compared to, let's say, when the voice physically has been pushed too far, when there is just too much use, given that it is within a human body and has its limits. And so knowing the difference of what it needs, and knowing that I approach them in this knowing of what are the practices and exercises that restore the voice to your most natural way of being, to your most efficient use, so that you can do what you need to do. And what are the practices, sometimes similar, where the voice is the healing element. So that's what it sounds like you're doing with the singing when it comes through in that particular way. For me, this is funny. I practice voice in a lot of different ways and play around with it. And as most people I've come across, tend to say, if you ask them, where do you get your best ideas? They're like, in the shower. I'm like, yeah, me too. That's also where I can literally get into these out of mind moments of vocalizing and allowing the vocalization, just as you allow your intuition to come through. I don't know what's going to come next, but I feel into the vibrations of it. I feel into the sound and the resonance of it without even caring or knowing anything is happening with pitch or technique, or it's nothing like that. Yeah. You might equate it to maybe when people experience like chanted texts or certain types of just vocalization without words, maybe. But that's what it sounds like you're tapping into, the times that it is a source of wellness and healing for you, and you just go with the flow of it. Mm-hmm. And then just being mindful of the times where, as a physical instrument and as a vocal athlete, there has to be some structure and boundaries for practice and prioritizing so it can continue to work the way you want it to. Yeah.
I love that. Thanks for explaining that and sharing your experience in the shower with allowing really your intuitive voice to make sounds and do whatever it's meant to do.
Whatever it's meant. And it's fascinating. Exactly. And you feel so much like that. You just feel so much lighter. It's a way of releasing, of clearing, of all of these kind of things that again, vocabulary wise, I've kind of learned over the years, but it just can feel completely effortless and truly a great practice for those who are still too attached and judgmental of themselves for how it sounds, whether the pitch is on pitch or not, or if others can hear them. So it's an interesting, that's what I love about that kind of practice too. The clients of mine who get to that level, whether they do it in the shower or not, are ones who tend to need those longer containers, because I don't think we are here to be fixed or rush anything, or nothing's like an overnight thing. So those are the folks who first have to kind of get comfortable with playing with their voice and then can really allow it without overthinking it.
I love that. I feel like the car as well for me has always been an outlet.
Yes, that can be a great outlet, and same, especially as you're in that space of letting come through whatever's going to come through, while also acknowledging use. Is there overuse? Is it too much? If it's not hurting, great. If it's starting to feel like there's any additional effort, or you do notice you have to take longer to recover after, that's kind of a trickier one. It may not be hurting in the moment or straining in the moment, but later you're like, wow, it's still not quite where it needs to be. You see what I'm saying? That's also a sign that, okay, what can we do to truncate that time and be more regimented about that, while also, like you did this morning, humming and playing with things that physically warm it up. But dose does matter. So while it is a very resilient instrument, it's not invincible. So play with where it feels good to you, but also where you can go, what does it need truly right now? And you'll know. Yeah.
And with that, one more question is coming up and then we'll wrap up. Do you now see the power in being silent as well? Have you had a journey with that?
I love that this came through, because just moments ago when you mentioned something, I heard power of silence, and I thought, oh, and you were saying something and I said, oh, okay, if it comes up again, great, we'll address it. So thank you. The power of the pause. Pausing is not something that people do well. If we think of it in terms of communication, people can usually feel awkward, feel like they have to fill the space, feel like they are kind of more of what I used to do, have to keep saying something so that they're understood or heard. Or in the case of some people I met, again, mostly women, happen to find themselves, say, as the only woman of color in a room of all white men, and feel that they must keep talking or else their turn will be taken and they will not get to have their say. And all of these different ways we kind of keep pushing to fill space, because we get uncomfortable with silence and we get uncomfortable with space if we haven't allowed ourselves to be open to the work of just sitting and being. So for me, that has looked like, what does it mean to pause more in conversation? Can we do that without interjections? I was just working with a woman yesterday and she's like, I do all the time and I say these interjections. Okay, some of those are just going to happen. But when they get too pervasive, it is that early indicator that you feel like you have to kind of keep pushing, keep holding your turn. And sometimes it's better in the pause just to allow yourself to process what's going to come next, as well as the listener. They need that time. For those of you who speak on stage and more public speaking, you know that has to be part of the mix. If you are on all the time and don't have dynamics in that, you're going to wear your audience out. They're not going to truly hear some of the things that you want them to. And you're also like this wall coming at them, that really doesn't give them a chance to absorb what you're saying. So I think silence in that way in communication can be really important. And remember, it's a 50-50 street. So you're not meant to do all the speaking, nor are you meant to do all the listening in silence either. There has to be that give and take. And yes, it's been a good practice for me to recognize when I don't need to speak up and when I don't need to say something. And it's this physically, it's this really, especially like some of these group programs I used to be part of, or networking groups. And if there's all this discussion, it's this very, to me, like, oh, like palpable. Like I feel my no. So I'm like, okay, thank you. Nope, not supposed to say anything. Okay, fine. I'll just be. And yet I can feel this physical like stopping. But again, it's not like I'm silencing myself. It's again hard to iterate, but it's one of those things where yes, it has been powerful, because then either it doesn't, whatever I was going to say doesn't even come up or need to, or I get the actual invitation afterwards externally, and then it is received a bit more, or it was somebody else's stuff. So what I mean by that is, yes, I can say things and it can land the way it's meant to, and other times not at all, but then someone else says it and it does land. I no longer take that personally either, because many times I can sit in a group and just before someone says something, I've thought it and I'm like, oh, okay. Now I go, okay, thank you, Divine. Like, how interesting. Was I supposed to say it, speak up and say that? Maybe not in that instance, but someone else just said it. We're on the same wavelength, if you will. Okay. But sometimes it's not even mine to say. To release the sometimes stubbornness and that desire to be heard has been a good practice with that one, for sure.
Well, thank you. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I'm so excited to just even shed light to anybody, because you all have this instrument, whether you think you talk a lot for your profession or not.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, I was listening to you on another podcast, and, there was the example of a woman who volunteered at church and had kids, and like, she was just wearing her voice out doing all that. So you don't have to be a speaker or a singer. You do use your voice. So where can people find you to kind of just dip their toes in and learn a little bit more?
So the main places I hang out are on Facebook at Your Vocal Vitality, LinkedIn at Brienne Hennessy, and my website, which Dayna kindly mentioned before. That is where you can sign up to my email list through that current freebie. I'll also be releasing a workshop for the Ignite Your Intuition, a recorded version, so y'all can watch it at your own pace and do your own thing with that. And then at Instagram, we didn't get into this today, but my Instagram is now where I intuitively post. So it doesn't appear very active relative to algorithm world, which I don't adhere to. It is a place that now I just share intuitively. So for those of you who are interested in that side of it more too, you can find me there.
Wow. Well, I'm for sure going to check that out on Instagram. That sounds so lovely. I love that you have all those outlets. And I will just say, for those of you who sign up on your website, whether it's for the freebie or your email list, this is my first time talking to you today, but the way I read your emails, I felt the exact same warmth from you from just reading your emails. So you're very authentic through your speaking and even, online as well. So thank you so much for your presence, Brienne. This has been absolutely wonderful. And I imagine, especially since we live in the same city, we will be connecting in person soon.
I hope so. That would be delightful. I love it. Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in and for believing in the intuitive magic that exists every day.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinary Magic is a Lit Path Studios production, produced by Jamie Gale and Dayna Faye. Music is by Shane Ivers. Until next time, I wish you many powerful moments of ordinary magic.